Hello, Michael Chigani, and this is Straight Talk. With me today is Professor Yuen Kwok Yung. Professor Yuen, you're a well-known face in Hong Kong now, even though you're wearing a face mask. You're a microbiologist with the University of Hong Kong, and you've been advising Carrie Lam along with three other experts on how to deal with this coronavirus. Now, Professor Yuen, a couple of days ago, you said that the government was going to hand out face masks to everybody in Hong Kong. But now that this pandemic has slowed a bit in Hong Kong, we're not having any new cases for quite a few days. Is it a gesture that's come too late?
I don't think so, because this pandemic is going to last. And we still would have sporadic cases during the summertime, even if the summer heat and all the sunlight is killing the viruses in the environment. And then as autumn and winter approaches, it is very likely that we'll have another major wave of this novel coronavirus infection in Hong Kong. Because just a few months ago, about 1 month after this epidemic starts in Hong Kong, we have checked the antibody level of 500 Hong Kong citizens of different age sectors, and we don't find any antibody at all. So even now, I think in Hong Kong, most people except a few thousand people who might have been infected, most people in Hong Kong would not have an immune
So they're not
response.
immune. It's easy for
immune,
them to catch the virus
which means
if it
that
comes
the
back.
herd immunity is approaching zero in Hong Kong. So if there are cases being imported in Hong Kong, the whole epidemic can replay, and it can be even more disastrous if we are not really prepared.
More disastrous than what's happened in the past few months?
Well, of course, if you are not well prepared, we will be like New York. Remember that around 3 months ago, I say that if we do not do any control measures, about 20% of the Hong Kong population will be infected, which is 1.4 million people. And even if 1% died, which means that 14,000 people would die. And that is exactly what is happening in New York.
So we took preventive measures early enough. But you mentioned about the hot weather, that the virus will be less effective. So are you saying that in the summer months we can relax a little bit?
Well, a little bit, but not too much. Remember that in summer, there are a few issues happening. First, it is very hot. The virus survives much shorter in duration. The sunlight, especially UV light, will be killing the virus if it is in open space. But remember also in summer, many people are going indoor to have air conditioning, and that will allow the virus to survive longer too. And at the same time, because the weather is hot and humid, people tend to take off the mask. So there would be sporadic cases in Hong Kong during the summertime if we completely relax all our control measures.
You know, Professor, this is an interesting issue that I want to ask you about. If you're outdoors in the sunlight, a lot of people are kind of wondering, and because I've also seen people, now there are lots of people in the streets and along country parks and so on. Some of them are no longer wearing face masks. Now, I think a lot of people want to know this, and you're an expert. If you're outdoors and you're walking on your own, you're not talking to people, you're walking past other people, you're in the sun, there's a gentle breeze, do you really need to wear a face mask?
No need at all. But if you cannot keep yourself from other people for 1.5 meter distance, then you still have some risk.
But you don't, maybe it's not possible to keep yourself 6 feet away from other people, but if you're walking past other people, is that a risk? You're not stopping and talking. He's walking, you're walking, you walk past each other. Is that a risk?
But if that person is sneezing or coughing, then you might not be protected. You may still get an infection. But the important issue, the pragmatic issue, is that many people do not know how to keep the mask hygienically, which means that when you take it off and we put it up, there is a danger of you self-contaminating yourself. And that's why for myself, I basically start to wear a mask when I go out of home, enter the lift, go into public transport, and until I arrive at the hospital. And then inside the office, then I start to take off my mask. and then we take it up again very carefully when I go back to home, and that would save the mask, because theoretically, once you take off a mask, you should throw it away and wear a new mask when you take it on again. But that would be very wasteful of mask. So we do not, as medical personnel, routinely advise a person to wear it and then take it off and wear it again. We do not make this recommendations.
Well, you know,
but for pragmatic reasons, I think that's the reason why we always advise people to just wear a mask when you go out, and then until you go home, then you take it off.
For how long is this going to last, Professor? I think a lot of people want to know. There's going to be some, there are some relaxations of the restrictions that Hong Kong have had. Some have been relaxed, others remain. For example, bars and karaoke bars and so on, those have to remain for a while. Is there going to be a time when we can go back to life as we knew it, or has that gone forever?
I think it would be a new normal. I would anticipate that if after you resume all the workplaces, resume all the schools, you start to have some cross-border travel, such as the cross-border school children. And despite all this has been resumed for 28 days, and still there is no cases at all, despite very extensive testing of all the deep throat saliva for mildly symptomatic cases. That is the time when you can really take off the mask.
So then you can see a time when we can take off masks, but do you have to keep social distancing as well?
You still try to be very hygienic, and especially when you're eating and drinking, that is the most dangerous time. Mask off activity is the most dangerous. But remember, there is one catch there. Even when people feel that you can really take off the mask, once you start to have cases coming, even a few sporadic cases, you have to put up the mask again. So and that's why I say that it is a new normal. It will no longer be in the past that you can completely forget your mask. And that's why the government is now issuing out all this reusable masks.
So the thing is, do you know where these masks are coming from? Because it came out of the blue. I mean, suddenly, where are these masks being produced?
I know that it is being arranged by the Innovation and Technology Bureau. And I know that they are collaborating with universities in Hong Kong who have a patented technology. And I don't know where it is being manufactured.
It's going to be produced on the mainland, because I don't think we have the capacity here to produce that many masks.
That you have to ask the government, the details.
So now, do you think that we should open borders with the mainland?
I don't think that is, that is a mature time yet. Right? I mean, we have to make sure that with the relaxation of measures inside the SAR, nothing happens. Then you start to deal with the border, because dealing with the border is the most dangerous. Not just the mainland border, but also the overseas borders, because the whole pandemic is everywhere. So I think that is the last thing to do. But of course, some
So
degree
you
of
have to keep the borders closed. The last thing is to open the borders.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, exactly.
Well, now, this is maybe a controversial question. Deborah Birx, the U.S. expert on infectious diseases, I'm sure you have heard the name, or you may even know her. Some time back she said, she doubted the figures that came out from mainland China with something like 4,000 deaths and 80,000 infections. And she showed a graph that said that just couldn't be possible. You say borders should be the last thing to be opened. But do you also believe in those figures?
I think the figures of everywhere have problems. It all depends on how much testing that you are doing and how good is your testing capacity. So of course, if you do extremely extensive testing, the chances that your figures is going to be more near the truth. But that doesn't matter for epidemiologists, because as long as you are using a consistent system of surveying what is happening, you just go along with the trend. You know whether your control measures are working or not working. Maybe your curve is like this, all right? But actually the real thing is like this. But it doesn't matter. As long as you institute control measures that can really threaten the curve. That is sufficient.
But
the important thing is to be consistent.
But are those figures accurate?
I never say something is accurate or not accurate because we don't know the truth. But the consistency is the main issue. As long as they are being consistently collected in the same manner, you know that whether your control measures are working. That is the most important thing. Of course, in Hong Kong, a very small place where you can do very extensive testing, I believe the Hong Kong figures are actually very near the truth.
Okay. Now, there's one thing that a lot of people would like to know. You say the border should be the last to open, but there is a pent-up demand, and people want to fly. Is it safe to get on an aeroplane?
Well, especially if you are going on business class where the seats are well spaced and you always wear a mask during the journey and you don't eat and drink, very safe. I don't think air travel
Don't
is a
eat and
major
drink,
issue.
because if you're on business class, you want to drink a glass of champagne or something.
I don't think that is very advisable thing to do because once you take off the mask, there's a danger. So if you look at the figures in Hong Kong, most of our cases are imported actually. But there are a portion which is local cases, and there are local clusters.
So
you look at all those local clusters, all those are related to mask-off activities. So right. you better not take off your mask when you are in so close contact with other people on the plane.
Quick break. See you soon. Don't go away. Thanks for staying with us. This is Straight Up With Me. It's Professor Yuen Kwok Yung. Yuen Kwok Yung, you're a microbiologist at the University of Hong Kong. Now, I was asking about air travel. People do want to travel. They want to get back to normal. You said that if you're traveling in business class, you don't eat anything, then...
you wear a mask.
You wear a mask and you're fine. But what about if you're in the economy?
That is much more dangerous because the seats are so close. And especially if the one adjacent to you doesn't wear a mask. When they sneeze and cough, then you may have a problem, even if you're wearing a mask. So there is still a danger of transmission. So I must say that it's better to space out the seats of the economy class.
So when is air travel going to come back? People want to travel, they want to go everywhere. Should everybody getting on the plane be tested first?
I think that is the safest thing to do. In fact, my advice to the government is that all those incoming travelers must be tested before they enter Hong Kong SAR. And when they arrive, they have one additional test to make sure that they are really free from the virus.
So do you see the future where air travel involves passengers lining up at the airport being tested before they get on an aeroplane?
As time goes by, there are more and more rapid tests available. Say, for example, there is one test now being used in the hospital authority. It takes you only 30 to 40 minutes to get the test results. So that can be done. And
but then you have to arrive at the airport even a lot earlier because there's security check. Now you've also added another thing to this, and that is taking a test.
Well, you always arrive at the airport 1 hour before you board the plane, right? So you arrive, immediately you are being tested, and then the results will go to the counter, and the counter will know after half an hour that you are negative.
So you see that as the new normal?
Yes, I think that is the new normal that we all have to accept.
That everybody getting on the plane will have to take a test first?
Yes.
Okay.
So 30 to 40 minutes, that is
now, you know,
really reasonable.
There's a global rush for a vaccine, and President Trump, I think, said a couple of days ago that one may be ready end of the year. Oxford is saying that they may even have one in September. When this vaccine comes, is that going to be a game changer and then we can relax or not?
Of course, we hope that it is going to be a game changer. But remember, a vaccine must be effective and must be safe. Remember, in the medical history of mankind, we have never routinely give out to human a large number of coronavirus vaccines.
Would you take one when it comes?
Well, I would wait. I would wait until sometime, say perhaps a year, after the vaccinees get vaccinated and get a natural infection and know unto what side effect can happen.
Are you saying to me, Professor, that as a microbiologist, when the vaccine comes out, people say perhaps end of the year or maybe early next year, that you won't take it?
I won't take it immediately. I would wait.
Why?
Because of unknowns. I mean, it is a completely new vaccine.
So you're afraid that it may not be safe?
It's not like influenza. Influenza vaccine has been there for a long time. and we know what are the side effects to anticipate. But in the case of coronavirus vaccine, we have so little knowledge about what would happen. So it is better to wait a bit.
But then isn't that going to discourage other people? If you, a top microbiologist, is saying you're not going to take it.
I didn't say that I'm not to take it. I just wanted we have to wait a bit before you take it. That's what I want to say.
A year.
In the meantime, I will still believe in my mask.
More than the vaccine?
Yes, at this stage in time. Remember, in the case of measles vaccine, measles in children, initially they killed the measles vaccine by a chemical and then inject in the children. Do you know what happened? Afterwards, the children get measles and get it even worse. We call this situation immunopathology.
Yeah.
The vaccine actually makes the disease worse. Now, we don't know whether this would happen for this novel coronavirus, but there's always a risk. There are unknowns there. So it is very important for everybody not to place too much hope on a vaccine. Okay. Remember, the mask is working so well. So I think we should rely on the mask first.
Okay.
Before you inject something inside your body. Once you inject it inside your body, it can't be taken out.
That's true. Now, a couple of days ago, Secretary of State, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said in a TV interview that he believes, and he has got ample evidence, that this virus originated in the Wuhan lab. He didn't say that it was manufactured. He didn't say it was a bioweapon. He just said it originated in a Wuhan lab. Do you believe that?
I haven't been involved in any investigation in this matter. For scientists, if we haven't investigated it, we can't say anything about it. But I know the Professor Xi Jinping, who is the one who is heading the coronavirus research in Wuhan. She's a very, very good scientist. And it is difficult for me to believe that the virus is coming from her laboratory. I have a lot of doubts on this. But of course, until further investigations show that is the case or not the case, I can't say anything. But I think the chance of this virus coming out from her laboratory is very, very low.
But you still believe that it came from the wet market?
It must be coming from, I mean, to me, the most likely explanation is that it's coming from the Hunan seafood market. The reason is because when they survey the environment in that market, which is also selling game food animals, they actually find that more than 30 specimens in the environment are positive for the virus.
So it didn't come...
in fact, the initial cases are all related to the market.
To the market. So it didn't come from American soldiers in Wuhan?
I don't think so.
Which is what...
I don't think that is another... I don't think that is a possibility at all. So I don't think all these coming from lab thing or coming from American soldiers things are true. Most likely possibility is from the market. So
now there are increasing calls for an investigation into how it originated, why it originated, for future reference, for future viruses. But Mainland China is refusing to have an investigation. Should we have an investigation for clarity?
Well, I must say that once things are being politicized, it is very difficult to get the truth straight. You can always do investigations, but once
But if it's a global investigation that is not politicized, right? It's a global investigation.
It is not being politicized. It's obviously being politicized. We can't escape this reality. Now, so once you have these issues coming up, then people will be very reluctant to be investigated, and that is understandable. Well, I'm a scientist, not a politician. The decision has to be at these high level where different countries, leaders are talking about it, and I don't have any opinion on this. As I always say that as long as we are in the truth, we are safe. When we are further away from the truth, we are in big trouble.
Well, you said earlier that Hong Kong handled it very well, and the figures are quite accurate. Another place that handled it extremely well is Taiwan, right? Mm-hmm. They've got fewer cases than even Hong Kong, right? In Hong Kong's case, there was an earlier reluctance by the government to close borders, even though you had advised that they close the borders, and it was due to public pressure that the Hong Kong government eventually closed the borders, and that's why we are where we are now, right? We took a lot of action. Now, Taiwan has always said that it should be at least given observer status at WHO because it is part of the global community fighting this virus. But do you think they should have that status? They had it before some years ago.
Again, Michael, I'm not a politician. I won't be talking anything about this because it is outside my arena already. I just want to say again that Hong Kong has been successful for three very important reasons, or four very important reasons. The first thing is that we all have universal masking. And remember, even if we may be a bit late in closing the border or controlling the border, the virus come in, the local transmission is being stopped by wearing masks by everybody, including those asymptomatic virus shedders. That is a very important point. The second very important point is we are the first in the world that use deep throat saliva for extensive testing.
That is important, you say, right?
Very important. Because by doing that, people, you know that taking a nasopharyngeal swab is rather invasive. It induces quite a bit of discomfort, sometimes even nasal bleeding. And people doesn't like it. And the doctors and nurses also doesn't like it. Because when you put such a swab inside your nose or throat, it induces coughing and sneezing. And the one that collected, the doctor and nurse, can be infected as a result. And then finally, you have shortage of swabs in United States, for example, because even the swab is quite expensive. Now, as a result, by using early morning deep throat saliva testing, which is now found to be just as accurate as using nasopharyngeal swabs.
Should everybody get tested? I mean, should I get tested? Or
if we have enough testing capacity, the first and most important are those who are symptomatic, even mildly symptomatic. And especially in the elderly home. You know that many people in the elderly home died in United Kingdom and also in US. Right. And so these are what we call the high-risk people that will be immediately tested.
I've got 1 minute left, Professor. Now, you say that in the summer it might go away a little bit, but you expect it to come back strongly in the winter?
Very likely. Very likely, because the herd immunity is so low. And travel cannot be completely avoided. So it would be very likely to be reintroduced in Hong Kong during the winter time.
So in the winter and in the fall, in the autumn, it'll come back and we'll have to go back to wearing masks and social distancing, and the restaurants are far apart and the bars are closed. Is that what you're saying?
That is very likely to happen. Very likely. Unless we have a safe and effective vaccine.
We're not going to have that by this coming winter.
Unlikely.
So then the social distancing and all that will have to continue in the winter. That's probably what you would advise the government.
Yes, but probably we would not be as unprepared this time. We would be very prepared with all these reusable masks there, hand hygiene, sanitizer.
Okay, I've got to end it. Thank you. See you next time. Good evening.